we need to start making more conscious material choices.
I set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.
Hello and welcome to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's DIF, the online festival of ideas aimed to shift mindsets and inspire action toward a circular economy. Now, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is 9 years old, can you believe that? 9 years old, and we were launched with the idea of accelerating the transition toward a circular economy. And right from the outset, we decided that learning would be a crucial part of our mission. In this session today, we are going to hear why we made learning a crucial part of our mission and what it is that we do in the learning space. My name's Colin and I'm part, actually, of the learning team. I'm the host in this session and we'll have a few guests on today from the learning team who will talk to us about the work that we are doing. But this is an interactive session, so please make sure that your thoughts, comments and questions are coming in to us through the page that you're watching this on, and someone will diligently be sending them through to the iPad in my hands. So, we're going to start off today with the learning lead at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's Jules Hayward. Jules, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Jules, tell us then, why is it important that we work in learning? Because we do work in, well, we produce insight and analysis for governments, for businesses, but why also do we work in learning?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to kick off the session with. I think one of the key pieces is about the combination of these different activities. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a massive global mission to shift how the global economy functions. And in order to create that change in the industrial system, we need to work with all those different players and enable them to understand what this topic is, to apply it to their own context, and to ultimately create solutions, circular solutions at scale. And so if we were to just work in one sector, i.e. in business, we wouldn't be putting in place the policy enablers that business requires to create that shift. And likewise, how we think shapes the world around us. And therefore, if we weren't working in the learning space, we wouldn't be enabling people to think differently and ultimately create new ways of doing things that are fundamentally different from the current linear system that we work within. So I think it's really key that we have those three key elements working together to create that massive change at this scale and pace that's required today. I also think that the learning work that we do is providing a context for people to go on that journey of discovery. And whether that's at a light touch way where you're just exploring a report, you're following a video link through the DIF, for example, that might lead you into a much more fundamental learning experience where you would start to build up that knowledge to the extent that you can apply it to your own context, whether that be in business or in a more formal learning environment in a school or university. And I think we're going to touch on that whole continuum right across from schools through universities and in the business and professional context.
Maybe a warning for people at home, we'll use the jargon informal, formal learning. So formal is like schools, universities. Informal is more the type of stuff people might go out to learn for themselves, I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think those terms are used in different contexts all over the world. But certainly with our work here, we tend to focus it's schools and higher education as those spaces where learners are actively engaged in a context of gaining new knowledge, developing their skills, and ultimately preparing them for their lives, their onward careers and their role in society.
So 9 years old, the foundation. What on earth have you been doing in these last 9 years in this learning space?
Well, it's we, Colin, right? I mean, we've been doing a lot of this together over the last 9 years. I think certainly from a learning point of view, the highlights have been that we started off very much in the schools realm. So we developed a field officer program which was providing resources for school educators all over the UK, of which half of which were actively using our resources after 2.5 years. We work with curriculum developers and exam providers to share those teacher resources and really inspire a generation to rethink the future. I think our learning from that was that the scale and pace of change that we were able to achieve in that national curriculum work in the UK was just not significant enough. So we then moved more into the work with the International Baccalaureate and other much more global learning providers in that formal context. Universities have been very proactive in engaging in this space in terms of the applied research, in terms of the courses that they provide, both formal and informal, so accredited courses, world's first MBA, PG certs, masters, many minors and electives all over the world. And I think, you know, one of the programs that we ran together for 5 years was the Ellen MacArthur Fellowship, where we had students from all over the world coming together with their academic mentors to join us for 5 days. And those more transformational learning experiences where we're together physically and we're able to explore this topic, develop the critical thinking around it, ignite that human ingenuity that's required to address some of the major barriers around the circular economy. I mean, that was a real highlight for me, and I think how do we create transformational learning at scale has always been at the forefront of our strategy.
And it's a combination, isn't it, of how we reach people at scale through working with curriculum bodies and such like, to the sort of micro stuff, working with a handful of people. And we've seen great successes in the face-to-face stuff. I mean, just some of our staff actually have come through that process of working closely with us. And if anyone actually is watching at home thinking, how do you get involved in some of these face-to-face projects? If you look at the learning pages on our website, you can see that we run workshops on a regular basis, and it's a chance for folks of all shapes and sizes to get involved in those programs. But Jules, if you could boil down what we do in learning to 3 catchy phrases or bullet points, what would they be?
Well, I think that learning for a circular economy requires 3 key things. From my perspective, I think that a recognition that this is about motivating people. And I think we motivate them both through providing the rational insight and analysis and coherent economic articulation of the opportunities, as well as the emotional elements around the circular economy. What is the human experience of going on this journey, and what stories can we bring to life that really ignite many others to engage with it? And so I think motivation is a key element within any learning experience. And so how do we motivate people, I think, is a key driver for our work. I also think that the fact that the circular economy is addressing some of the world's biggest global issues, obviously the climate change report we've just shared really articulates the role of production and consumption in addressing climate change, with nearly 50% allocated to that system of production and consumption when it comes to mitigating climate change. So I think you know, there's the climate change piece, there's the waste agenda and how we can redesign systems so that they are much less wasteful. And I think also there's some clear links from a societal point of view and social perspective as well when we look at job creation and impacts more regionally from a circular economy point of view. So all of those things create a sense of purpose. And I think, again, that's a key element that the circular economy provides, is an individual's, like, human sense of, I have a role in a change agenda, that I understand the direction of travel we're going on and how I can contribute to that. And I think the third element is about a systems approach. We talk about systems thinking a lot in our educational programs, and throughout learning we know that we have to enable people to think at the macro scale and to understand the big picture, but then also apply that in a more focused point of view and getting into the detail and the application, and ultimately to develop the agility to move between those two mindsets. And so that systems point of view I think is critical, and I think will come out in the rest of this session as well.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in just a sec, but I wanted to pick up on this idea about the fact that we work with universities, and the idea is out there in a way that it absolutely wasn't when we started this mission. And of course that means that we're going to come under a lot of critical analysis of the subject matter. I just wonder if there's any stories to tell of the reaction that we've had from various quarters when we start talking about a circular economy.
Well, I think fundamentally the idea of moving from a take, make, waste economy to one that is regenerative and restorative by design is pretty undisputable. I think the kind of pushback really comes in, well, how do we do that? And what does that look like in reality? And there are massive barriers to achieving that level of change. And I think that's really where we are now in this agenda, is that the idea is becoming increasingly pervasive. The three principles of the circular economy are becoming more understood. And I think now we're getting into the space of really creating the networks and the communities of practice that can get into okay, so how do we make this happen? Both physically in terms of the products and system services and infrastructure that we build, but also in terms of how we interact in supply chain management, in organizations and how they function. As human beings, how do we approach our individual dynamics so that we can break out of the existing systems? And I think that critically, that systems approach is what is required within that. And systems thinking is a difficult topic to understand, because it brings in understanding of complexity science. And so that's again another potential barrier from a educator and learning provider point of view, is how do you actually tackle the complexity of the topic and make it tangible and relevant. And I think one of our speakers who's coming on in the session later, Monica, will talk about this, because that tension in a business context is really very, very live.
Well, since you brought up systems thinking again, let's cut to a film. We're going to watch film in just a second, but you'll be back on the sofa by the end of this show. We're going to show a clip of a chap, Ken Webster, we've done a lot of work with. And in this clip, Ken talks about the importance of systems thinking and mapping it to the economy. So here we go, here's Ken.
A really big challenge for a lot of people, economics, for some it's been a journey from the mechanistic view to a more enlightened complexity economics view. But the general view of the economy is still of a machine that processes resources, creates economic growth, and it's a shame we've got these problems at the other end. And it's a shame that we might be running into resource scarcity. Whereas if you see it as one complex adaptive system, you can then work within these patterns, these flows. The existing economy talks about just throughput. It degrades capital and runs the system through it. How much can you get through? You're a winner. Whereas a complex adaptive system would say, there's a stock, there's a flow, there's feedback. If it's going to work long term, all of these three components have to work in an interdependent way and continue working.
Okay, so that's Ken Webster speaking in a film called Flow of Wealth, or A Wealth of Flows, one of the many films that we've made here at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, and films that many schools, universities and businesses use in order to help people understand a bit more about the circular economy. Now, the sofa has changed. Well, in fact, the sofa hasn't changed, but the contents has. Joining me now on the sofa is Harry Wavell and Rhaenyra O'Donnell. Thanks for joining us, folks. Harry's from the schools, or works with schools, and Rhaenyra, you work with universities. Jules had started up there by talking about scale and the work that we do in learning. So I want to speak to you about the scale ambitions that we have. So we've got ambitions to engage with like 150 million people worldwide. So they're actively learning about the circular economy. Harry, you work with schools. What role do you think schools plays in all of that?
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely vital that we are working with school-age students because these will, they will be the future leaders of tomorrow in various roles. And so it's vital that we reach them and we sow the seeds of the idea in the future generations. And I think I would echo Jules and say that the mindset shift that's required for a circular economy, we need to start implementing that kind of shift whilst minds are forming, whilst these young people are developing their outlooks and perspectives on life and the world in general.
It's like the front of pipe versus end of pipe approach, isn't it?
Exactly.
So the mindset is set that circular is the way that things should be done, things should be made, and it becomes natural to them to be thinking in that way as they become decision makers.
Exactly, so that hopefully by the time they go on to higher education and universities, it's about cementing the idea rather than them being exposed to it for the first time. Because by then, it's quite late.
All right, so we're going to come back to some of the detail of what you do and how we go about doing it. But Rhaenyra, the same question to you. With scale being our ambition, what role does universities play?
Well, just picking up from Harry's point, actually, universities are the place where hopefully we're kind of scooping up that future generation, and we are really cementing some of these new and innovative ideas in terms of shaping their thinking and the future leaders and the future workforce of tomorrow. Where, universities play a really crucial role in the teaching side of things, and I think Jules mentioned it earlier, that they are really shaping young minds and getting those fundamental core principles of circular economy embedded in the way that the future workforce thinks. But it's not just about teaching with universities. I think over the last 9 years, the foundation has worked predominantly with the teaching and research side of universities. So we're teaching the future leaders of tomorrow, but at the same time, universities are doing a load of research which is helping apply the circular economy. So there's lots of examples of where universities are supporting businesses in making changes in how they now apply the theory of circular economy to their own businesses. And I think it would be easy to go, well, it's all about teaching and it's all about research, but actually universities in themselves are engines, they are entities that have a life of their own. And I think increasingly we are seeing that as a hugely important part of the transition to a circular economy. So not only what they teach and what they research, but actually what impact is that having with the students who are going through those programs? So what are students doing to start to drive the agenda? How are they pushing back at their university management to say, what are you doing to make our university more circular? How are they starting up businesses and how are universities supporting that? So really interested in seeing that role that universities play in supporting the students coming out with this new knowledge and how they apply it. And beyond that, if we start to think about universities almost like mini cities or a business in their own right and how they organise themselves. If you think globally, the number of universities or higher education institutions that we have, and you think about how they run their own campuses, they are fantastic test beds in their own right, and how they can design the way they manage their procurement, their supply chains, the food that comes onto campus, and they could actually be walking the talk. So these students are learning about circular economy, but actually how the university then organises and structures its own business side of things is equally as important. And I think the last area that we're sort of seeing more and more is how universities are really engaging locally, whether it's with business, whether it's with their local government or their regional government. And, you know, there are a number of different advisory boards at a global scale, and I'm pretty sure if you looked at most of them, you would see some really qualified academics engaging at a global level in this agenda. So I think, whereas it's easy to think of universities as being hugely important in terms of teaching and research, actually they are a massive sector on their own globally that has the ability to impact huge amounts all over the world.
And they seem to be very I mean, we were at a conference recently for universities, and they seem to be very motivated in the idea of doing better, environmentally speaking, on their campus. But there's that problem, isn't it? They're so big that you don't often have the researchers speaking to the campus staff. But that's your problem to deal with. You'll work it out.
We will work it out. And I think what was lovely at that conference, actually, which was in America, was seeing how campus sustainability and what the universities are doing at a campus level is starting to be picked up, and the relationship is starting to filter through to the teaching. I think students are increasingly, and I know we've had this conversation, haven't we, where, you know, students are learning something to then come out of that environment and not see it embedded in their actual environment in which they learn is quite a challenge. And you were saying the same with schools.
Well, definitely. I was at an event recently where the teachers were saying, basically, it undermines everything that we teach them in the classroom if they then go out into their learning environment and they see single-use plastic everywhere, or it's very, very wasteful linear examples all over the campus environment.
Yeah.
I think, and it's true for schools as with universities. They're looking at ways that they can adopt those practices in the environment as well as the teaching and learning.
Harry, let's talk a bit about what it is you literally do with schools and how you support them. You tell us what you do there.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to start really by giving an example of a project we ran this summer just gone in Oxford. We ran a summer school for 1 week, and we invited 10 students from all over the world to come to Oxford, and we had an immersive circular economy learning experience. And the way it was structured, it's the first time we've done this at this age group. They were all between 15 and 18. And the way it was structured was that each day was devoted to a different topic of the circular economy. So we started with a big picture introduction, and then we looked at what does the circular economy mean for fashion? What does it mean for food? We had a whole day on looking at the built environment and transportation. And then the idea was that at the end of the week, we'd bring all of these different strands, all of these different learnings together and say to students, right, working in groups, your challenge is to design and build your city of the future. So what do you think a city would look like in 2050 that was built on the principles of a circular economy? And so that was a great kind of systems thinking exercise as well, because using the city as the context, everything is interconnected. All those elements have to tie in and work together. So it was really cool, really hands-on and creative. But we were kind of responding to feedback that learning about the circular economy can often seem quite theoretical, quite abstract. So we wanted to take students out and get them meeting people that are working in this space and seeing real-world examples. So we took them to London for the day. We took them to a fashion designer, Chris Rayburn, who's creating high-end fashion from surplus military stock. Kids loved that. And we took them to the London Waste and Recycling Board to hear about all of the initiatives throughout London that they're involved in.
And that was a good way for us to test the idea of these type of workshops. But we also do the sort of larger scale stuff working with curriculum bodies as well. Can you give us a bit of detail there?
Exactly. So, I mean, this was only 10 students. So from a scale perspective, we're trying to reach a lot more. So those face-to-face things are brilliant, and we can learn a lot and take a lot of insights from that. What do they respond to? What messaging works? What are they really interested in, these future generations? But we also do a lot of work around curriculum development. So there's sort of a bottom-up approach and then a top-down approach. And we work with the likes of the International Baccalaureate and United World Colleges. And we're specifically focused on the subjects that have an overlap with the circular economy, like design technology, business, economics, geography. And so we're making some progress there to try and integrate circular economy into the curriculum. And we understand as well that teachers have a very hectic, busy schedule. You know that, I know that, we used to be teachers. And if something isn't actually on the syllabus, it can be very difficult to carve out time. It just becomes a sort of extra add-on that only a few, a small percentage of people will actually look at.
And the curriculums tend to have like a turning circle of an oil tanker, so it can be a slow and a painful process sometimes to get in there.
It is slow and it can be painful, but all the more reason to get in there because if you miss the window and one opportunity, then it could be years before you get another chance.
And it's about finding the right person, isn't it, in an organisation who sees the potential, the possibilities, and then I know our work with IB is really sparked because of that.
Yeah, and they've been fantastic in that they really understand the concept. We've invested a lot of time in kind of, I guess, communicating the idea and what's important about it and how it can fit, and they get it and they see the value in it, and their educators see the value in it. So you have teachers in the IB who are crying out for this, who are actually saying to the head office, I think this should be in the curriculum. We want to see more of this. Perfect. Can we carve out more time? So it's not just a kind of centralised top-down thing. We're hearing students and teachers saying, we want this.
Perfect, Harry. And we know literally what are we doing with universities?
Well, it's quite similar, actually. We've done a number of sort of smaller, intensive exercises with universities over the last couple of years. But the challenge for the organisation now is how do we take that and how do we learn from that and how do we scale? We've got some really challenging targets around the number of people that we want to engage with who understand and engage with the circular economy. And those in higher education play a really large role in that. So over the last couple of years, we've done a number of things. We have developed a really good suite of higher education resources, which are available online and available to download. We have established what we are calling the From Linear to Circular programme, which we trialled last year and we will be rolling out more of over the next coming years, which is a bit like Harry's workshop over the summer. It brings together a smaller group of students and young professionals in an intense environment, but allows that greater sense of interaction and play. So we've been doing those sorts of things. I think if you look on our website, we did a really good report last year which looked at a kind of global snapshot of where we were with higher education, and there were 138 universities out there that had courses with circular economy in the title. And that's only the start of the story, because we know that so many are teaching courses about circular economy, but they may not necessarily have it explicitly in the title. And I suppose moving forward, what we're aiming to do is really scale the network that we've started to build. So we have a small network of universities at the moment who are all doing interesting and exciting things in various aspects of the circular economy. And our team is really keen to expand that. We know that we don't know who's doing everything out there, and we also know that the network can be really, really powerful. I'll give you a great example. Over the last couple of weeks, I spoke to a university in Australia, one in Portugal, and one in the UK, who are all thinking through the built environment and how you build a new campus and put circular economy right at the heart of everything about that. And I suddenly went, well, why don't you guys talk to each other? And they have, and it's been really great to have feedback that it was a fruitful conversation, and that's the sort of thing that we want to be able to do more of. We want to be able to bring more universities into the network so that we can connect people and we can help facilitate that, sharing that best practice. But it's all very well me saying this, but we've actually got a really great video from our latest network university. So Nancy Landrum, who runs the Circular Economy Programme at Loyola University in Chicago, sent us a little clip on how she has found working with circular economy really important and the kinds of resources she uses. Here's Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Landrum with Loyola University Chicago. I think it's our responsibility to promote circular economy and to educate tomorrow's future business leaders. If we don't do it, who else will? And how can we do that? I think we can do it through education, through classes, through workshops, through training, through hands-on projects that will get students involved with businesses and engage with others. And finally, what resources are we using? We use a lot of the circular economy resources on the Ellen MacArthur website. We use the readings, the publications, the reports. We also use videos, and most importantly, we use the Circular Economy Design Guide quite a bit.
Okay, so yeah, that was a word from one of our network universities. Harry, some questions coming in from the website. I say Harry because I've got one for you. It's more of a point. Rita says, it's important we work with schools because not everyone goes to university, but most of us go to and finish school. It's a very fair point.
That's a great point.
And also important to shift mindset in society.
Yeah, I think that comes right back to where we began, really. We recognise that the circular economy represents a fundamentally different way of thinking and acting. That's crucial. And if that's the case and we want to achieve a circular economy, we have to go where minds are forming and mindsets are being shaped. So schools is the place for that.
And agreeing with you is Hannington on Twitter. He says, for us to change our results, we must change our thinking first. Other good questions are coming. There was one from Matthew. You've covered it, though, really, about the role of the campus that can play in its local area. And we've got another question from Melissa, but maybe we'll come back to that later on. Just a final point, Harry, you want to tell us something about resources, or you could both tell us a little bit about resources that we've got, people watching this can get access to.
So this is just a really simple sort of card game, really, a card activity that we've developed. And it works I've used it with primary age students and with 16, 17-year-olds. But quite, very simple. We've got a set of cards. We've got, for example, lorries, landfill, power stations, trains, etc., etc. But the idea is that in groups, you can hand these out and you can ask students to tell the life cycle of a plastic bottle. And you can give them a little nudge if they don't know that plastic comes from oil. So you've got the oil rig and then you've got the shipping. And so they have to tell this story. And they eventually, they go from the oil rig all the way through to transportation to the consumer to landfill. And you ask them to kind of make some observations. What do you notice about this system? Okay. Well, and you can ask, where is waste generated in this system? And they come to the conclusion that everywhere waste is generated. And then you can contrast this with handing out some different cards that we have, which are biological cards that contain like the sun, bacteria, plants, trees, and ask them to arrange those in a way that makes sense. And the difference is, what this highlights is that the man-made kind of plastic bottle system is a one-way, it's a linear system, highly wasteful, not very efficient. When you contrast this with the biological system that they've mapped out, you can see that it operates in a completely different way. You ask them, where's waste generated? There isn't any. Waste becomes food for something else all the time. And so you can use this as a springboard then to start discussing, okay, well, what if we had an economy that worked more like this biological system? And then you can explore off of that.
It can be a really powerful, I mean, I've run it a few times myself, a very powerful activity. And one of many resources that we have, downloadable from our website for schools. Also, you mentioned universities. We've got a bunch of resources that are there for anyone watching this who wants to pick them up and use them in whatever their setting happens to be. But I'm going to say thank you very much for Neera and Harry for now. Coming up in just a minute is our business learning superstar, Monica. We do a lot of work with businesses, and just before Monica joins us, we're going to hear from a few of them about the work that they do to teach their employees about the circular economy and how to apply it.
From a circular economy point of view, we created a series of materials, from inspiration videos from Ellen to material on describing how the linear systems broke and moved to circular. Design principles, we embedded those principles into what we called our design guidelines. These sorts of things are critical, and they need to land where people are accessing training in an organization, whether virtual or formal training or introductory training when they join.
So communication is key for making a circular economy as part of the daily business of our colleagues. So one way is naturally through education. So we have launched educational program, but at the same time we have also set up a Google Plus community in order to share everything, and we have now workshops, internal workshops, and webinars to share good ideas, good practices, challenges cross GBUs and cross functions.
So at Target, we have decided to change the game in circular economy, and it is fully part of our ambition and our strategic pillar. That's why it's crucial for us to make sure that our people at Target and our sales guys also really understand what does it mean for them and what does it mean for Target, how they can contribute to circular economy, and how they can embark also our customers and our different stakeholders. So it's definitely, we have seen that learning engagement and learning activities are crucial to make our circular economy ambition happen in the coming years.
Okay, so there's some words from a few businesses in our business network. Joining me now on the sofa, Monica. Monica, thanks very much for being here. Most people watching this are going to understand what learning at school and in university is all about. How does learning in a business context differ?
I mean, firstly, maybe to say that learning needs to be very specific to people's job roles and relevant to their company or industry they come from. But also it's really important to understand that it's not an add-on, like an isolated activity that happens in the sustainability team. But really when we look into transitioning to a circular economy or creating a circular business, it is a whole system change, a whole organization-wide endeavor. And thus the learning activities need to be also planned that way. But more specifically, what the differences are, professionals are under a lot of pressure to deliver results. And that means that when they go on a course or do an online training, they want to be able to see how they can implement these ideas or their learnings into something that's concrete at their workplace, in their world of marketing or supply chain or whatever their world is. And usually the top 3 questions that we would be asked is, what is the circular economy? What does it mean to the world? But what does it mean for my company? Why is my company interested in pursuing that? And what does it mean to me in my role, in my team business function? So there's a level of specificity that I suppose is asked for. And going back to the notion of learning has to be practical. In the work that we're doing with businesses, we see that we're reaching a certain saturation level, which is quite great. I mean, there's a good, a lot of the businesses we work with have a basic level of understanding around the circular economy, and now they're really keen to scale the practical aspects of, okay, how do we apply these circular economy principles into our business practices? How do we move towards that transition? So these are the sort of questions that are coming more towards us.
You've got answers for all of these questions?
Well, no, not necessarily. That's the thing. That in the end of the day, the foundation, what we're aiming to do is provide guidance and provide scalable resources, easy to use, and also modular to fit into the different contexts they use them for. But it is not about giving prescriptive directions like the 10-step guide to transform your supply chain in that industry. But we also collaborate, we work with different professionals to guide them in their solution finding process, so to speak.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, the concept of the circular economy is simple at its basic level, but it's when you start getting into what does this mean for me and for my business or even my role within my business, really no one has the answers to all of these questions.
Yeah, and I think that it leads back to what Jules said earlier around the motivation and purpose, and seeing in terms of purpose, seeing where the organization is heading and why it makes sense strategically. And there are a number of businesses who clearly communicate that, and whether on CEO level or senior leadership level, it's positioned that way. This is something that we are doing as a company, and there are concrete targets. Some even go as far as to have it in the performance reviews as indicators. But yeah, so there's a sense of clarity how that fits with what the company's doing, but it's also the personal motivation to wanting to go to our learning hub or go to and onto these courses and actually then take that step to translating these ideas and concepts back into their specific context, which is the big step. And so you need a level of motivation and drive to do that.
And literally, what is it that we're doing with people? You say they're coming to us, they're asking us questions, but how do you support businesses? Or we've got programs that they can access?
Yeah, so we do, so both online as well as face-to-face, but with the scale of ambition that we're having, most of our learning activities are in the virtual realm. So we have, for example, regular webinars, monthly webinars. We have the online e-learning course that you can find on our website. There are also, and we have downloadable resources. So for example, on the Circular Economy 100 website, in the Learning Resource section, you'll find some, such as the Action Learning Set Toolkit, which we launched this year. But on top of that, we also have partnered in the past with universities who have their own professional learning offerings. So such as a MOOC, which has a couple of different courses on an introduction level, but also on packaging and the circular economy of packaging, and a 6-week masterclass, which is really very much appreciated by our business network, because it gives a certain level of depth and understanding, lots of business cases. Every week there's a webinar with speakers coming in that are practitioners coming directly from the world that relates to them with all their questions and challenges that they're facing. And such as the way we work, it also offers lots of connections between different businesses, which of course we know from stories in our network. Yeah. That can be really successful. I mean, some of the, yes. So, yeah, I mean, at that course, they work with each other, but also we have, in terms of the face-to-face element, we run, for example, sessions at the acceleration workshops of the Circular Economy 100 network, where we, for example, ran in the past skill-building toolbox sessions, half a day long, where you get to, just build certain competencies that would help you to bring these ideas into your context and pursue that transitioning process. But at the same time, we also run kick-off workshops with global partners to see what their longer-term ambitions are, and learning is a key component of that. So we're really embedding that into the activities that they're running, the different channels they're using, and that relates to communication and the campaigns they have internally. It relates to more than just a course, for example. Right, question has come in from Nicola. I'm going to put to you, how can we influence our organisation to adopt circular economy into its business models? I'm guessing there's some resistance there from the business, or Nicola's uncertain where to start. So what advice do you give to a business that wants, or someone within a business that wants to do something? Yeah, well, it's always good to start with where the opportunities lie, and this is where professionals do like to see the proof points to how this is generating business benefits, so I would inquire into what is the company already doing, and some are a bit more outspoken about it and have something externally on their website, publicly readable, but some might not. So you might want to inquire into that, like what's already happening, and if you are interested and find out more about, for example, we have on the website, on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's website, the Learning Hub, which has a number of mini online learning courses on different topics, such as fashion, or on an advanced level introduction to circular economy, but also how do I pitch it to my organization, or how do I start making introductions internally or running my own event to help people understand it. So there are a number of tips that would help you to see how you can make a move and can start engaging with your colleagues and start creating these visible benefits that they can see. So imagine they've made that first move, they want to start. How do they go about running internal learning programs? What advice and support can we offer? Yeah, well, there are a couple of things. The creating an awareness and understanding is an absolute no-brainer as a starting point to really, be on the same ground. And I think there's still a lot of confusion around these concepts, and sometimes it's being used synonymously for sustainability, which is clearly not the case. So there's something around helping your colleagues understand what it is, having a strong narrative from the company itself, why they engage around circular economy, but also the motivational aspect that was mentioned earlier, to really inspire and engage the employees, so that it's not just something they're being mandated to do, but they're really bought in and are actually proud of being part of that movement, that they, so it's a company-wide movement. The other aspect is to to create a community internally as well. So there are, with a couple of companies we partner with, there's those employees who have come back from these courses and are keen to engage and are keen to explore further opportunities within the business, to have the opportunity to do that, whether there's a Google Plus community or whether there's a face-to-face, where they meet up regularly, to really help them connect with each other, but possibly also do that industry-wide, kick off something where you can collaborate with others. And that's really for knowledge, experience exchange, but also to support each other on the various challenges that they're facing.
Perfect. So I'm hearing you say you find the opportunity for your business, therefore you're setting the context, then you find people who can come with you on that journey, understand it, and then begin to apply it.
Yeah, and then, I mean, as mentioned in the video as well, then of course companies offer their own internal online courses. They have knowledge management systems where they can access content. But yeah, so there's most companies go for a virtual approach because they know this is how they can scale, especially in a company of 100,000 plus employees. But I think it's also important to be strategic about where you can embed content or aspects into existing face-to-face training activities, and and in all of that try to embed it to what's already there, rather than create that kind of standalone piece somewhere that people can't relate to.
Makes sense to me. Monica, thanks very much. So there's so much going on at the DIF over this entire week. We're running something like 10 sessions a day. To introduce you to some of them that are coming up, let's hear from my colleague Piers.
Hi there, it's Clem from the DIF team, and I'm here to tell you about some of the sessions that are coming up on the second day of the DIF. At 1 p.m. today, we will discuss the role of learning in the transition to a circular economy. Later on, at 3 p.m., we will learn about the new generation of women climate leaders, and at 5 p.m., we'll learn about biomimicry. We hope to see you there, and as always, don't forget to use the hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter to comment and ask any of your questions, and you can catch up on anything you missed and find the full schedule at thinkdiff.co or on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's YouTube channel.
Well, it turns out that wasn't Piers after all. Joining me back on the sofa then is Jules, our education lead. Jules, we've heard from schools, colleges, we've heard Monica from the business side of things. Anyone who's watching this is a learning provider. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pieces that really stands out for me is the role of the educator or the learning provider in igniting human ingenuity. Walter Starhill, who's one of the key thought leaders in the circular economy related to the performance economy, a lifelong piece of work that he has evolved that really makes up some of the kind of heuristic of the circular economy. So Walter quoted in a session I was running with him a couple of years ago, what is the key factor to the circular economy success is how we ignite human ingenuity, and I think that role is really the role of the educator or the learning provider. How can we enable individuals to see their role in their context, whether that's a learning context, schools, higher ed, or within a company or governmental organisation. And I think that as an educator, if we can look for ways for creating those teachable moments, and the circular economy has a multitude of reasons why it is why it's going to be difficult to create that level of change. But if you look at change throughout human society, I think that you can see that it is through creating clarity of our purpose as individuals and a sense of direction of travel, whether that's through crisis or through bringing people together over a shared vision where we're heading towards. And I think that's what we're really doing within the circular economy, is creating a shared vision. This is the direction of travel we're heading in, and this is how you can play a role in that journey.
And you're very keen on that idea of showing people how they can play a part, because sometimes a concept as large as the circular economy can seem depersonalized, I guess, because you talk about it, it's actually about a system shift. But we've found in our work in education, when you tell people about the role that they can play within it, the motivation level seems to rise quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key piece, that we need massive change at scale and pace, and therefore we need to be able to really enable people to go above and beyond the sort of day-to-day grind of work, and actually move into a space of mastery and excellence in terms of how they're bringing this concept to life.
And part of the way of doing that is telling great stories.
Yeah, storytelling, and I think the DIF is a great example of where we're curating some of those stories and sharing them on a global scale. So I'm really glad to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Jules. Okay, so the DIF is the place for great stories, absolutely is, and there's a lot more of them to come as this week goes by. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for putting your thoughts and questions in. As always, keep watching at thinkdiff.co and commenting using hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter. Goodbye for now.
We need to start making more conscious material choices.
Set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.